My name was Farid. I was a scholar of the Quran, revered in Mecca's hallowed halls of learning. I taught, led prayers, and upheld traditions that spanned centuries. But beneath that exterior of discipline and respect, a storm brewed within me, an emptiness, a gnawing doubt under the weight of profound expectation. I was a man caught between devotion and despair, until the moment I faced death. It was not a simple accident. It was a reckoning. In that fleeting instant, as the world faded away, I found myself in a dark expanse, and there, illuminated by a radiant light, stood a figure unlike any I had ever known. Jesus called my name, not as a subject of debate, but as a friend reaching into the shadows of my soul. In that sacred encounter, a truth unfolded before me, a revelation that pierced through the veils of tradition and shattered the chains that bound my heart. What I witnessed was more than a personal transformation. It was a glimpse into a spiritual war that rages beyond the borders of faith and ideology. I saw how the very beliefs I held close were being manipulated as instruments of control, a facade masking a deeper, darker agenda woven through our societies. And as I returned to consciousness, I realized I was no longer the man I once was. I had crossed over into a realm of enlightenment that demanded a price. In the aftermath, I encountered a tidal wave of rejection. My family turned their backs. My colleagues labeled me a heretic. I stood alone, burdened by fear yet exhilarated by a newfound clarity. In the shadows of my isolation, I began to search further, delving into the pages of a book I had once dismissed, and discovering not just profound wisdom, but a burgeoning community of seekers, all yearning for the truth I had now embraced. This journey is not merely my story, it echoes across the globe. People everywhere are awakening to the reality that binds them, seeing the chains of deception for what they are and yearning to break free. So today I invite you to join me as we unravel the threads of this spiritual awakening and guide others towards a truth that liberates. Before we embark on this journey, I'd love to hear from you. Where are you watching from, and what time is it there? Your voice matters. And if you too are hungry for truth, subscribe to Truth from Beyond. Together, let's explore a path that reveals not just darkness, but also the radiant light that brings freedom and hope. The story begins in an Islamic university in Mecca, a place steeped in tradition and unwavering devotion. I was one of many students dedicated to the rigorous study of our faith, striving to uphold the honor of my family and the teachings of Islam. We moved through our days guided by strict Islamic norms, reciting verses and engaging in deep discussions about religious texts. The atmosphere around us was filled with reverence, a collective silence that reinforced our obedience. Yet amidst the disciplined routine, there was an undercurrent of tension, a silent struggle that not many dared to speak about. I found myself grappling with a sense of emptiness that grew increasingly louder with each passing year. While I excelled academically, my heart was burdened by questions I was afraid to voice. I attended lectures on the grandeur of Islam, yet felt a widening chasm between those teachings and the reality I observed around me. The deeper I delved into my studies, the more I sensed the hidden agendas that lay beneath the surface, how tradition sometimes overshadowed the core essence of faith. I watched as my peers fervently accepted everything without question, while I felt an increasing urgency to seek out my own truth. One fateful night changed everything. As I prepared for bed, exhaustion overwhelmed me, and I fell into a deep sleep. Suddenly, I found myself enveloped in darkness. When I opened my eyes, I was no longer in my dorm room. I was in a desolate desert under a starless sky. Confusion washed over me, but it quickly faded as a figure approached from the shadows, illuminated by a bright, ethereal light. It was Jesus, beckoning me forward with a warmth and love that penetrated my very being. As he called my name, the weight of all my doubts crystallized in that moment. This was a revelation that I had been waiting for. Jesus began to unveil truths that shook me to my core. He showed me how the elite manipulated religion to maintain control over the masses, using fear and obedience to create a cycle of deception that left many souls trapped. The visions he shared exposed the division wrought by the hidden agenda of those in power. I saw images of wars and suffering, justified in the name of faith, and I understood that the teachings I was raised to respect sometimes served the interests of those who wished to keep us compliant. This revelation was profound. I realized that what had been presented to us as absolute truth was often wrapped in deception. When I regained consciousness in my bed, I felt transformed. The encounter with Jesus opened a floodgate of understanding that I could no longer ignore. There was an urgency in my spirit that beckoned me to speak out, to unravel the deceptive layers of belief that had kept me and so many others shackled. I understood that my journey was not solely for my awakening, but for others who still wandered in darkness, seeking the light of truth. The spiritual war within me surged to the forefront, pushing me to confront the chains of tradition and follow the path of awakening that Jesus illuminated. It was time to find my voice and share the insights I had gained, no matter the challenges that lay ahead. My name is Farid, and at 30 years old, I've earned my place as a respected Islamic scholar and teacher. I dedicated my life to understanding the Quran, immersing myself in its verses, and guiding my students along the same path. However, despite the reverence with which my colleagues and students regarded me, I felt an emotional emptiness creeping into my heart. Each day, I would awaken with a sense of exhaustion that went beyond the physical. It was a spiritual fatigue that weighed heavily on my soul. I was navigating a storm of internal strife, caught in a tug of war between blind religious obedience and a growing dissatisfaction that echoed through the depths of my being. As I stood at the front of the classroom, lecturing passionately about Islamic doctrine, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was fundamentally wrong. The very teachings that had once fueled my faith now felt like chains binding me to a structure that didn't allow space for questions. My students' eager faces reflected hope and curiosity. I longed to share with them the depth of my internal struggle, about the nagging doubts that surfaced during my prayers. Yet, fear kept me silent. How could I express these thoughts without jeopardizing my place in the community? The fear of rejection loomed in my mind, making each day a fragile balancing act between my responsibilities and my craving for authenticity. One fateful night changed everything. While I sat alone, deep in prayer and contemplation, I suddenly lost consciousness. When I awoke, I found myself in a vast, dark desert. Confusion consumed me, but before I could process my surroundings, a figure emerged from the shadows. The light surrounding him radiated warmth and love. It was Jesus. As he approached, I felt all my questions, my fears, and my insecurities wash away in his presence. Farid. He spoke softly, yet his voice thundered through me, grounding me in that desolate landscape. I felt seen, understood, and for the first time I believed I could find the answers I sought. Jesus began to reveal the truths I had long buried beneath layers of tradition and duty. I saw visions of how the hidden agendas of those in power manipulated faith to sow division among people. The elite used religion as a means of control, stifling spiritual growth and awakening. I witnessed the grim realities of conflict perpetuated by religious differences, where leaders orchestrated wars in the name of God, exploiting the very beliefs meant to unite us. The urgency to expose this deception ignited within me. This wasn't just an awakening for myself. It was a call to action for those still trapped in fear and ignorance. As I returned to consciousness, the impact of my encounter with Jesus weighed heavily on my heart. I was determined to confront these revelations and challenge the deceptive narratives that had shaped my life and the lives of others. I felt compelled to share what I had experienced, to awaken those around me to the truth. The fear of persecution lingered, haunting me with thoughts of losing everything I had built, but the desire to live authentically burned brighter. I understood that this was not just my personal journey. It was about standing in the light of truth and helping others find their way out of the darkness. The spiritual war was not only real, it was a battle that demanded our engagement, a struggle for awakening that had to be fought with courage and love. Signs of doubt began to emerge within me as I stood in prayer, feeling a profound emptiness that I could no longer ignore. My life as Farid, a respected scholar, had always been filled with devotion and discipline. Yet, in those quiet moments, I felt a gnawing disconnect between the rituals I performed and the truth I desperately sought. While my colleagues recited their prayers with fervor, I was haunted by unspoken questions that loomed like shadows over my faith. Was everything I believed truly justified? Could the religion that promised so much actually be a mechanism for control rather than liberation? These internal struggles began to manifest during my moments of solitude, becoming a growing source of distress. There were nights when sleep evaded me, and I lay awake, grappling with the unease that enveloped my spirit. The dreams grew increasingly disturbing, each one echoing the same message. Something was fundamentally wrong. Each morning, I awoke feeling burdened, as if the weight of my doubts pressed down on me even more. I started to suspect that the teachings I had upheld, those I had internalized and delivered with conviction, might actually be masking a hidden agenda. How could I reconcile the ideals of peace and compassion with the stark reality of suffering and division surrounding us? In those turbulent nights, I often found myself pondering the impacts of faith beyond personal belief. The more I thought about it, the clearer it became that religion could easily be wielded as a tool by the elite, used to manipulate and divide people for their own benefit. I saw how faith had been commandeered in many parts of the world, justifying wars and societal fractures. Those thoughts made my heart race. Was I merely a pawn in a spiritual war? A wave of nausea rolled through me as I realized that the very system I revered could be complicit in perpetuating cycles of deception and suffering. This tumultuous journey reached a crescendo during one particular night. As I prayed for guidance amidst my confusion, I felt myself slipping away from the physical realm. Suddenly, I was no longer in my room but standing in a vast, dark desert, feeling a mix of fear and awe. It was there that I encountered Jesus, a figure of radiant light and unwavering love. When he called my name, it felt like the entire universe acknowledged my existence. In that moment, all my doubts evaporated, replaced by a clarity that shook me to my core. Jesus began to reveal profound truths, showing me the complexities of our world, the manipulation at every turn, and the truths obscured by years of tradition and deception. The revelations poured forth like a rushing river, washing away the layers of uncertainty that had clouded my spirit. I saw visions of the societal structures built on division, where the elite continued to profit from conflict and fear. Jesus illuminated the path to understanding, guiding me toward the truth that would lead to spiritual awakening, not just for me, but for all those who had been misled. The urgency of his message compelled me to confront the deceptive narratives that had shaped my life and the lives of so many others. It was a call to arms, an insistence that I had a responsibility to seek the truth and bring others along in this journey of awakening. As I returned to consciousness, the revelations burned brightly in my heart, igniting a fire within me that could not be quenched. I understood that my transformation was just the beginning. I could no longer remain silent about the truths that had been revealed to me. The spiritual war was not just a battle within me. It was one shared by countless souls seeking liberation from the chains of deception. A mission unfolded before me, not merely to advocate for my awakening, but to empower others to recognize their own potential to awaken, to break free from the hidden agendas that had kept us all in darkness. A pivotal moment occurred one fateful evening as I drove through the streets of Mecca, lost in thought about my faith and the increasingly heavy burden it had become. My life as a scholar devoted to Islamic teachings had once filled me with purpose, yet now I found myself suffocated by expectations and unresolvable doubts. I was grappling with questions that haunted me day and night, battling against a sense of spiritual emptiness that permeated my being. In that moment of distraction, everything changed. I felt a sudden impact, a violent jolt that threw my world into chaos. As the darkness closed in, I slipped away from consciousness. When I awoke, I was no longer in my car, but in a vast, dark desert. A sense of desolation surrounded me, and in that eerie stillness, confusion gripped my heart. The environment felt both terrifying and strangely familiar, as if I had entered a realm beyond the physical world. As I began to comprehend my surroundings, a brilliant light pierced through the darkness. It was so intense that I instinctively shielded my eyes. From that light emerged a figure, Jesus, radiating an aura of love and acceptance that enveloped me. As he stepped closer, I felt an overwhelming peace washing over me, as if all my fears had been struck down in an instant. Farid. He called, and in that moment, the world around me seemed to vibrate with divine energy. His voice resonated deeply within my soul. I felt seen, understood, and unconditionally loved. Jesus began to speak, revealing profound truths that shattered the illusions I had clung to for so long. I was shown visions of the manipulation occurring in the world, how the elite had crafted a hidden agenda using religious structures to control and deceive the masses. I witnessed how this deception extended into the very fabric of society, perpetuating conflict and suffering disguised as divine will. My heart ached as I recognized that the values I upheld were often used as weapons against the very people they were meant to uplift. With each revelation, the weight of my former beliefs began to lift. Jesus illuminated the reality of the spiritual war being waged, not just within my heart, but across nations and cultures. I watched scenes of turmoil as leaders exploited faith to maintain their power, sowing division among the people. The awareness of this manipulation sent chills down my spine. The truths I uncovered called for urgent action, urging me to break free from the constraints that had held me prisoner for too long. Each insight felt like a gentle nudge toward awakening, a message that the path to freedom lay in embracing authenticity and confronting the lies we had accepted. As this divine encounter deepened, I felt a renewed sense of purpose surge within me. I understood that my transformation was not solely for my liberation. It was a call to awaken others who still wandered in darkness. I realized I had a responsibility to share what I had learned, to confront the deception that clouded our understanding of faith. The fear of what lay ahead began to fade as I embraced this mission. I could no longer be a passive observer in the spiritual war. Jesus had given me the keys to liberation, and it was time for me to share this truth with the world, to ignite a spark of awakening in others still bound to the chains of deceit. Upon returning to life, the harsh reality of my awakening hit me like a tidal wave. The moment I opened my eyes, I felt the weight of rejection bearing down on my shoulders. My family and colleagues, once pillars of my existence, quickly became the architects of my isolation. They had branded me a heretic, a traitor to our faith, and their disdain was palpable. The hurt radiated from their eyes, their whispers echoing through my mind like a haunting melody I couldn't escape. I tried to explain the transformation I had undergone, the truths revealed to me during my near-death encounter with Jesus, but each time I opened my mouth, the words fell flat, swallowed by their judgment and disbelief. Days turned into weeks, and the emotional toll was debilitating. I felt like a ghost in my own life, wandering through the motions without a place to belong. Guilt consumed me, gnawing at my insides. I grappled with the fear that by seeking the truth, I had sacrificed my connection to the very people who had nurtured me. Those moments of familial closeness now seemed like distant memories, replaced by agony and a soul-crushing loneliness. The spiritual war raging inside me intensified as I battled between my newfound beliefs and the guilt that echoed from my past. The deeper I delved into my beliefs, the more I realized the vast chasm that separated me from those who had once been my allies. In my pursuit of awakening, I began to uncover a network of individuals who had also sought liberation from the constraints of dogma. They shared experiences that mirrored my own, a yearning for truth in a world shrouded in deception fostered by the elite. Listening to their testimonies fed my resolve and bolstered my spirit, even as I faced the unrelenting fear of condemnation from my family and community. Jesus had illuminated paths of understanding that transcended mere religious adherence. I could see with clarity how systemic manipulation had bred division and fear in societies around the world. As I connected the dots, I understood that my awakening was not mine alone. It had the potential to ripple through the lives of others yearning for truth. My heart raced at the thought of sharing these insights. I envisioned creating spaces for dialogue, where others could question the unexamined beliefs they had inherited, breaking free from their chains of ignorance. But even amidst this excitement, the fear of backlash gnawed at my resolve. Despite the tension and fear, I felt an unwavering call to action urging me to share the revelation I had received. I embarked on this mission, determined to be a beacon of hope for others trapped in spiritual darkness. I began reaching out to fellow seekers, embracing the vulnerability of sharing my story, acknowledging my struggles and the deep-seated fears that threatened to hold me back. With each conversation that unfolded, I felt the release of burdens I had carried alone for too long. I was not just fighting for my soul, but for the collective awakening of a community that desperately needed to confront the hidden agendas that silenced their truths. The journey ahead promised to be fraught with challenges, yet I was resolved to confront every obstacle, believing fully in the validity of my awakening and the mission placed on my heart by Jesus. Amidst the panic and isolation that enveloped me after my awakening, I found myself consumed by a desperate need to explore the truth beyond the confines of my upbringing. Fearful of facing backlash from my family and community, I sought refuge in secrecy. I began to quietly explore the Bible, each verse igniting a flicker of hope within my soul. However, my journey wasn't merely about reading. It was a quest for understanding, a way to reconcile the profound revelations Jesus had shared with me during that pivotal encounter. The weight of my past bore down on me heavily, but with each passage I read, I felt as if I was uncovering layers of deception that had long kept me in bondage. In the solitude of my room, I found myself diving into the testimonies of others who had also left Islam. The stories of their struggles and triumphs resonated deeply within me, fueling my desire to embrace the truth I was beginning to uncover. I was struck by the courage of those who had dared to challenge the status quo and pursue their awakening, often at great personal cost. Their journeys were a lifeline for me, reminding me that while the spiritual war within me was daunting, it was not one I had to fight alone. I felt a sense of solidarity with these newfound voices, each testimony becoming a beacon of light in my darkened reality. Through my online searches, I stumbled upon a vibrant community dedicated to supporting individuals like myself. This support network offered a safe haven where I could express my doubts and fears without the weight of judgment. Here, I was encouraged to explore my beliefs openly and honestly, to question the hidden agendas that had clouded my understanding of spirituality. The camaraderie among the members of this community brought me a sense of belonging that I so desperately craved, reminding me that awakening was not just possible, it was a shared journey, filled with collective strength and shared experiences. As I engaged more with this community, the peace I felt amidst the turmoil grew stronger. Each interaction, each shared story slowly chipped away at the isolation that had once felt insurmountable. Together, we discussed the systemic manipulation orchestrated by the elite, how deception had been woven into the very fabric of our religious teachings, creating barriers between humanity and the truth. I started to grasp the gravity of these insights, how vital it was for each of us to recognize the spiritual war that was being waged, not only against us, but also within us. We sought to illuminate the hidden truths that had long been shrouded in darkness, empowering one another to break free from the chains that bound us. Despite this newfound sense of belonging, the fear of losing everything familiar still haunted me. The love for my family remained a bittersweet ache deep within my heart. I longed to share this awakening with them, yet the fear of rejection loomed larger than life. The balance between honoring my past and embracing my truth felt precarious, but the urgency to advocate for the truth that Jesus had revealed to me continuously pushed me forward. I knew I had to confront the deception head-on, not just for myself but for all those still searching for their own path to liberation. I was determined to continue spreading hope and awakening in whatever way I could, prepared to face whatever challenges lay ahead in this spiritual war for truth. Recognizing that my experience was not merely personal but a call to alert others about the spiritual battle I now perceived, filled me with a sense of urgency and purpose often foreign to me. The moment of my encounter with Jesus in that dark desert had marked a significant awakening, revealing truths that dissected the layers of deception I had been fed for so long. I understood now that I had been chosen not only to embrace this awakening for myself but to become a witness to others who remained lost in the fog of faith manipulated by a hidden agenda. Each revelation felt sacred, and the weight of responsibility settled on my shoulders like a mantle I had not anticipated bearing. I grappled with the daunting realization that speaking out could jeopardize my life and safety. The fear of backlash loomed large, I had witnessed firsthand the repercussions faced by those who dared to challenge the established norms. In my community, being labeled a heretic could mean not only losing family but also a life filled with hostility and isolation. Still, as I contemplated the weight of these risks, the urgency to share the revelation burned brighter within me. I could not turn my back on the truth that Jesus had imparted. It was not merely a gift, it was a calling, pulling me forward into the fray of the spiritual war, beckoning me to fight for the souls still ensnared in deception. I began to strategize how I would approach this mission, knowing I needed allies who shared this journey. The online support community I discovered became my lifeline, connecting me with fellow seekers who understood the complexities of embracing a new faith while navigating the remnants of the old. In these exchanges, I felt the power of our collective experience, the strength drawn from shared struggles. Each interaction was a step toward amplifying our voices, and I started organizing meetings where we could witness to each other's journeys, illuminate the hidden truths, and empower one another in this rebellion against the deceit that surrounded us. As we gathered in those small circles, the conversations became charged with energy and conviction. I spoke passionately about the manipulative tactics employed by the elite, how they twisted religious narratives to keep entire populations under control. Together, we examined the societal implications of this deception, how it led to division, conflict, and a disturbing apathy toward the suffering of others. I could see the flickers of recognition in the eyes of those around me, how my words resonated with their hearts. Each time I shared my testimony, each time I offered insights from my encounter with Jesus, I felt lives being touched, seeds of hope being planted. However, the threat of my past still loomed. The faces of my family haunted my thoughts, and doubt crept in like an unwelcome guest. What would they think if they learned of my transformation? Would they understand, or would they shun me completely? As I prepared to rise further into this mission, I felt the tension within me mount. The battle was not only external against the forces of deception, but internal, as I sought to reconcile my past with the promise of a new future. With every step, I reminded myself of the truth I had encountered, the truth that Jesus had revealed, and it drove me forward, pulsing through my veins with a fierce determination to shine light into the darkness that tried to engulf me. In a symbolic act of liberation, I made the decision to leave my home behind and change my name. As I stood at the threshold of my past life, there was a sense of finality in the air, a weight lifting from my shoulders. I was no longer just Farid, the respected Muslim scholar. I was becoming someone new, stepping boldly into a future unshackled by tradition. The desert stretched before me, an expanse of possibility and uncertainty. Each grain of sand felt like a reminder of the burdens I carried. Yet as I began my journey, I felt a flutter of true freedom for the first time in years. With every step I took, I was both exhilarated and terrified. Leaving my family and community meant confronting the reality of the unknown, the very essence of fear that had kept me rooted in a way of life that no longer resonated with my spirit. Yet, as I moved further away from the confines of expectation, I felt the light of something greater guiding me forward, the divine call that had first spoken to me in the darkest hour of my life. I was determined to use my voice to evangelize others who were seeking the truth, just as I had been compelled to seek it myself. The vastness of the desert mirrored the expansive inner journey I was undertaking. I recalled the intense moment when Jesus had appeared to me, enveloping me in radiant light and revealing the hidden agendas behind the systems that governed our lives. His presence in that otherworldly encounter brought clarity and courage, unveiling the deception that permeated religious structures. I had come to understand that these same systems served the interests of the elite, perpetuating conflict and division while cloaking their true objectives in the guise of faith. Each revelation I had received urged me to confront my own beliefs and engage with the larger spiritual war at play. As the sun began to set, painting the sky with brilliant colors, I felt a surge of hope ignite within me. The knowledge that I was not alone, a part of a grander awakening, filled me with a sense of purpose. I envisioned communities coming together to shed the chains of manipulation and deceit, rising against the powers that sought to keep us blind. Each individual's journey toward truth could contribute to a collective movement that challenged the status quo. My voice could be a part of that symphony, calling others into the light of understanding and freedom. As I continued to traverse the desert, the challenges ahead were undeniable. I faced the stark reality of engaging with an ingrained belief system that often shunned questioning and dissent. The path would likely be fraught with opposition, reminding me that the awakening I sought was not only for myself, but also for those still trapped within the confines of dogma. Armed with the revelations of Jesus, I was determined to share this truth, to awaken hearts and minds still ensnared by deception. I felt the divine whisper urging me forward, assuring me that each step toward my mission was a step toward freedom for all who heard my call. Years later, as I became part of a Christian community, my testimony of transformation became a source of inspiration for others. It was a journey that began in the depths of despair, an awakening that reshaped my very identity. I can still vividly recall the day I accepted the truth about the hidden agendas that had long governed my thoughts and beliefs. It was born out of a profound encounter with Jesus, a divine revelation that shattered my misconceptions and illuminated the path forward. The sense of purpose that had long eluded me now surged within my heart, guiding me to share what I had learned about the spiritual war that rages both within and outside of us. With each gathering, I shared my story with those eager to understand the deeper truths behind our experiences. I spoke of my struggles, how I had once been bound by religious obligations, lost in a cycle of deception that left me emotionally drained. The moment I embraced Jesus and his message, everything shifted. I understood that the manipulation by the elite was not just a distant concept, but a powerful force affecting our daily lives. Each discussion opened a door for many in my community to question the narratives they had accepted, igniting a desire to explore faith beyond the confines of tradition. Yet, even as I found fulfillment in this new mission, an ache lingered in my heart, a hope to reconcile with my distant family. I often thought about my parents, the love I felt for them never fading, despite the chasm that had developed since my departure from our shared beliefs. The conflict between my newfound faith and the love for my family created an internal struggle I grappled with daily. I yearned for the chance to show them the truth I had discovered, to help them see the potential for awakening beyond the chains of deception. But how could I bridge the gap that now seemed unbridgeable? In a world rife with division, I recognized that my mission went beyond individual transformation. My experiences reflected the larger societal issues facing countless individuals caught in the grip of dogma and fear. I spoke passionately about the urgency of breaking free from the manipulative narratives that bind us all, urging others to join the fight against the deception that flourishes in silence. The spiritual war we were engaged in wasn't solely confined to our personal struggles. It was a battle for the souls of humanity, one that demanded recognition and action. As we continued to gather, I felt a growing sense of community and strength. The more we shared, the more I understood that this was a collective awakening, an uprising against the forces that sought to keep us divided. I was ready to confront the complexities of my past while forging a new path aligned with the truth I had found in Jesus. The tension between my desire for reconciliation and my commitment to this mission would not deter me. It would propel me to take risks, to speak boldly, and to advocate for the awakening that awaits us all. The journey ahead was marked with uncertainty, but I felt an unfaltering determination to rise and shine light into the darkness, both for myself and for those who still waited for their moment of truth. The moral message I began to understand was that while religion can imprison, the truth found in Jesus liberates. My life had been defined by a strict adherence to Islamic teachings, yet deep down I always felt a sense of confinement. Years spent studying in the Islamic University in Mecca had imparted a wealth of knowledge, but as I recited verses and led prayers, a haunting emptiness crept into my heart. I began to question not just my faith, but the very structure of religion itself. This internal struggle reached a critical point when I faced a physical accident that sent me spiraling into a near-death experience. A moment that would forever alter my perception of truth. As I lost consciousness, a profound stillness enveloped me, followed by the vivid sensation of being transported to a vast, shadowy desert. It felt surreal, yet somehow familiar. I remember standing alone, fear clawing at my chest. Suddenly, a radiant light pierced through the darkness, revealing the figure of Jesus. His presence was unlike anything I had ever known. Farid, he called my name, and I felt a jolt of recognition wash over me. In that moment, all my fears seemed to dissipate. Jesus approached me with compassion, embodying warmth that filled the emptiness I had been grappling with. As we stood together in that sacred space, Jesus began to unveil hidden truths that shook me to my core. He revealed the manipulation of faith by those in power, the elite who wielded religion as a tool of control, perpetuating division and strife among the masses. I saw visions of wars fueled by the deceit of leaders, where the innocent suffered while those at the top reaped the benefits. This was not just about my spiritual journey. It felt like a cosmic awakening to the reality of our world. The understanding that our suffering was often manufactured to serve those agendas flooded over me, igniting an urgency within my spirit. After the revelation faded, I found myself back in my body, gasping for air, the weight of what I had experienced settling heavily on my shoulders. The truths I had witnessed were now a part of me, transforming my understanding of spirituality and faith. I realized I was called to share this awakening, to expose the deception and challenge others to see beyond the comfortable narratives they had accepted. But the doubts and fears rushed back, reminding me of the backlash I might face from my family and community. The spiritual war within me intensified. I knew I had to choose between my safety and my calling. In the weeks that followed, I committed myself to this mission with renewed vigor. I sought out like-minded individuals who had also faced the scrutiny of questioning their faith. Together, we formed a community dedicated to exploring our beliefs openly and honestly. As I shared my testimony with them, I felt a sense of belonging that I hadn't known in years. We analyzed the hidden agendas affecting not just our faith, but society as a whole. It became clear that the awakening we sought had the potential to ripple outward, awakening others to the truth and breaking the chains of deception that kept so many in darkness. I realized that each step forward in the spiritual war was not just for me, but for every soul yearning for liberation. Now that you've walked with me through this profound journey, I must ask, have you felt the stirrings of doubt in your own life? A whispering sensation that perhaps there's more than what we see on the surface, that maybe the very structures we hold close could be veiling a deeper truth? Because, as I learned in that dark desert, there is a battle raging, one that transcends our individual experiences and binds us in a shared spiritual warfare. I found Jesus not just as a savior but as a liberator, calling us out from the shadows of manipulation and deception that so often ensnare our hearts. What I witnessed was not just my transformation, but a collective awakening waiting to unfold. People everywhere are beginning to question, to dig deeper, yearning for authenticity in a world steeped in lies. This journey is not mine alone. It's a call to each of you to reflect, to ponder, and to rise against the forces determined to keep us apart. I invite you to share your thoughts in the comments. Have you experienced a moment that made you question everything? Every story matters, and I read every one. Your voice could be the spark for someone else's awakening, and together we can create a tide that seeks out freedom for all. If this message resonated with you, please subscribe to Truth from Beyond and hit the notification bell. We need your voice in this movement of awakening, and trust me, what's coming next will only deepen your understanding of the truths we are unveiling together. In the next video, I'll explore the testimonies of others who have faced similar transformations and encountered Jesus in their darkest moments. I'm Farid, and thank you for embarking on this journey with me. Remember, the truth has the power to illuminate even the deepest shadows.